Welcome to Who's the Man? I'm George Jakovic, alongside the champions, ESPN analyst, Hall of Famer champion Tim Bradley, Brooklyn's Paulie Malignaggi, and Long Island's own Christopher Algieri. Guys, you guys are breaking down the lightweight division, giving us your top three. You know, Thursday night, Shakur is going for a belt at 135 against Edwin De Los Santos. So things are being shaken up a little bit in the lightweight division. Although Devin Haney still has the other three belts, he'll be fighting Regis Prograis in December. Tim Bradley, we're going to start this list off, and we're going to start from 3-1. Paulie, last time I think you were the only one that didn't reveal their picks. I think Chris and Sean kind of gave their picks away in the first 5 seconds of the show. Paulie remained true. He went from 3 to 2 to 1. He followed the format, so that's what we're going to do this time. Tim, your number 3 at lightweight is Raymond Morataya. Why is that?
Surprising. I'm sure everybody's going are you kidding me? Like, there's Lomachenko there. There's Devin Haney. Devin Haney's no longer coming back to 135, people. You just get that in your mind right now. He's at 140. He's not coming back down. Just doesn't make any sense for him, especially if he gets a strap there. So he's out of the picture. Then you have a guy named Keyshawn Davis, still up and coming. You know, his name has been, in the media lately for some extracurricular activities. He's suspended right now. I'm very high on him. However, Morataya, what he was able to display to me his last time out against Torres is that he's not only a back foot counterpuncher, he can actually come forward. He can dominate on the front foot as well. He has a great control game in the inside. I like his punch selection. I mean, he's deadly with both hands. And, I think that if he was a matchup against a Lomachenko right now, this version of Lomachenko, I think he beats him. I think he has both punches needed to beat a guy like Lomachenko. He has athleticism. Understand that I always tell you guys this, and you guys didn't believe me. Anybody that's extremely athletic will give Lomachenko problems. If you sit in front of him, and you're not athletically gifted at all, he's going to be able to dominate you because he's able to get around to the ins and outs and get off to the side of you. But when you're just as athletic and you understand the game and you have a really boxing IQ like Morataya does, you're able to cut those angles off on him. And once you cut those angles off on Lomachenko, he becomes what I call ordinary, right in front of you. Nothing dynamic, quick, inside the pocket, mid-range. I think Morataya can deal with that. No problem. He's younger. He's stronger. He has punching power that I think that'll get the respect of Lomachenko. So he's my number 3 guy. Who else is there? I think Zepeda is there. Zepeda, to me, gets hit too much. I think that a guy like Morataya can outbox a guy like Zepeda. He has the punching power to hurt him as well. Who else is there? I think that's pretty much it. The cream of the crop right there. Other than the other two that we're going to mention a little bit later. So Morataya is my number 3 guy. And I know what y'all going to say. Well, he hasn't fought anybody. He ain't fought nobody. Check this out. This is the difference. The difference is that when I never fought anybody when I was coming up through the ranks. And when I fought for the world championship, everybody was saying he never fought out of California. There's no way he's going to beat a guy like Jimmy Witter, who's number 2, in the world at the time. And I said, oh, okay. All right. They don't know me. I was focused. I was determined. I was training my behind off. I ate, sleep, and shit in boxing. You know what I'm saying? And Morataya has that same nature. He's determined to show everybody how great he is. So with that being said, he's my number 3 guy in the division. Just give him an opportunity, and he will show you how bad he really is.
Man, Chris is emphatic. Tim's emphatic. Guys, you have any problem with that number 3 pick? Because Tim is really laid it in there. I'm assuming you guys are okay with Tim's number 3, right?
Hey, it's a very respectable pick. I'm very high on the kid Morataya. Like I said, I think on previous shows, I've called a bunch of his fights as he's been coming up. He's been looking more and more impressive lately. And he's got something that I really look for in a young fighter. And to me, that's discipline. And not only discipline inside the ring, but he's got discipline outside the ring. He's fights disciplined fights when he's fighting. He's very much, you can see him working on things. You can see him improving fight to fight. And a lot of that comes from the discipline outside of the ring. He's rolling every fight into the next camp. So he's getting better each and every time. So very respectable pick. You had mentioned Keyshawn Davis, another guy that I'm very high on. I just think that Muay Thai would be ahead of him. I got Muay Thai as my number 4. He's just outside my top 3. I think he's a little more physically mature. I think he's a little more mentally mature. Obviously, talking about the outside the ring stuff. The only guy you didn't mention, Tim, that I would throw in there as well is Isaac Cruz. He hasn't been that busy, but he's a tough SOB, man. And he comes to bring it. He gave Tank Davis a tough night, probably one of the toughest nights he's had thus far. But my number 3 is Vasily Lomachenko. And Vasily Lomachenko, I think he's still one of the most talented guys in the game today. Yes, he's long in the tooth. Yes, he hasn't been as active as of late. Yes, he's coming off a loss. But he's still Vasily Lomachenko, man. And I think all of the experience he has, the amount of professional rounds that he's done, the level of opposition that he's faced throughout his career puts me ahead of a guy like Murataya. You had mentioned, Tim, like, oh, people are going to say he hasn't fought anybody. Yeah, you don't know what you don't know, but yeah, he's got talent. He's going to get there. But I still think a guy like Lomachenko, who can dig into that past experience, can pull fights out over some of these young guys still to this day. Yeah, he's going to struggle more than he used to. We saw that in the Jermaine Ortiz fight. He struggled mightily in that fight against a guy who hadn't fought anybody up until that point. But he got the win because he knows how to dig deep. He knows how to go, find that extra gear. I think he still has that. Father time happens overnight, but I'm still rocking with Vasily Lomachenko. He's my number 3.
Paulie, Tank Davis is your number 3.
Yeah, I think Tank is one of those guys that could even be a 2 or a 1, right? But he's a 3 because he's been at lightweight so long, but I don't see him actually chomping at the bit to fight these top guys, right? I mean, the Pitbull Cruz is a really good win. I mean, in hindsight, nobody knew Pitbull Cruz before that, but so we don't really know if even they thought Pitbull may not have been as good as he was, because we only knew Pitbull was good after that fight, right? And so, when you look at the overall resume at lightweight, it's decent, and you can tell. Listen, Gervonta is phenomenal as far as the potential that he has, but I don't see him like chomping at the bit. Tim talked about how Murataya wants to fight everybody. But obviously, a guy like Muay Thai is not in a position to fight everybody at this moment. Gervonta is. Gervonta's in a position to fight pretty much anybody he wants. He's got the big name. He's got the politics on his side and all that other stuff. But I don't see him really chomping at the bit to fight him, to get in the ring with these top guys. He's beating decent guys, beating some good guys. Even, like I said, Pitbull is definitely a good win. But I just, I don't like to watch guys who fight on pay-per-view that I don't really know their opponent until they get in the ring with them. You know what I mean? Or I haven't seen their opponent much on mainstream until they get in the ring with them. And when he fought Mario Barrios had this issue too, where it was, I know he fought him at 140, but again, it was, he was a promising guy, Barrios, and looks, in hindsight, the win looks good now because Barrios has done pretty well. But again, he's like, are you fighting these guys because they're good, or are you fighting these guys because you think they're easier than they are? I want to fight. I want to see pay-per-views with, and Gervonta is certainly a pay-per-view star, when guys are matched up where everybody, the entire population in boxing understands that these two guys are top guys, and therefore it's worthy of a pay-per-view, And I don't really see that in Gervonta yet, put him up higher than 3. But I think he's got the potential, the power, the ring IQ to even be a 1 at any given point in time, but I just don't see him pushing for that position. So I think 3 is respectable, and it's the right place.
Yeah, Paulie, I agree. I think Tim, I just want to say one thing. I think you're right with the criticism of Tank. When you look at his resume, it's not that deep at 135. It just isn't. You can't really dispute that. Tim, you were going to say?
No, I he's right about that, but at the same time, you being a fighter, you see the skill set that Tank brings. You see the punching power, the devastating punching power. You see the IQ. You see that he can move every direction. You see that, he has quickness, counter punching ability. I mean, he has it all.
Yeah.
He can take a shot, and y'all talking about Cruz. Cruz, understand that when Tank fought Cruz, Tank hurt his hand. Mm-hmm. He hurt his hand during the course of that fight. And we saw a different side of Tank. We saw a guy that was actually fighting off the back foot and, using angles to create his shots. And he's still able to pull out that win. Isaac Cruz, when I look at Isaac Cruz, yes, he's tough, but he's right in front of you. Nothing special, there's nothing glaring at me other than he's just a pressure fighter. That's it. He can be outboxed.
That actually that adds to my case because I think Isaac Cruz is the best fighter Gervonta's beaten. So If you're calling him ordinary, I mean, I think that's kind of worse.
I'm gonna poke holes in everybody talking about his resume a little bit. But Tim, finish your thought. I'm sorry.
But what I'm saying is that what other guys do you see in the division that displays the skill set of a Tank Davis? It's not a lot of guys, not even Lomachenko. Okay, this guy hits you and he hits you once on the chin. It's lights out. He hurts you. It's lights out. He's one of the best finishers in boxing. So, like, I understand the whole resume thing, but I'm talking about skill for skill, Paulie. And you know boxing, man. Yeah. And what you see, and what you're seeing, and what you're witnessing, and what you're seeing what this guy is doing.
But when
these average guys, or whatever you're saying, it's phenomenal.
It is phenomenal, but that's not being doubted. That's why he's even in the list to begin with. But when you see guys with this kind of skill set and this kind of potential that you're talking about, it's all there. I'll admit, IQ, power, boxing ability, all this stuff. It's usually that they're not getting the big fights because guys avoid them. Gervonta Davis is a guy everybody wants to fight because he's a money guy. So he technically is not in that position. He could fight all these guys, but he's not. So the fact that it's not happening is more on him than on everybody else. You see, when there was, for example, like a Golovkin was the scary boogeyman at middleweight and couldn't get a big fight, or Demetrius Andrade, guys like that, I really think they wanted the big fights, but they weren't in a position to really force them on people. Because they didn't bring enough money to the table, right? When there was always a bigger money guy in and around the weight class, like a Canelo, right? But Gervonta is kind of that guy at lightweight. So you usually see guys with this kind of package they bring to the table being avoided because they're so good, they're so strong, and all the other things that me and you have discussed, Tim. But he's not a guy that people are looking to avoid. He's a guy that people are looking to fight because he's a money guy. You know what I mean? And still the fights aren't happening. So for me, that keeps him at 3.
Well, Teofimo just did an interview and he said, he was like, well, Gervonta's fighting subpar guys because he doesn't have to fight the other guys. He's still making the money. He has the option. He has that driver's seat. So, there's that. But listen, like you said, Paul, you made a great point about kind of in hindsight, the wins that Gervonta gets. And I think Gervonta actually is going to be a fighter in hindsight that we look back on like, dude, that guy was always good. Maybe he wasn't fighting those top guys, but he's 29 now. He's entering that prime physicality. I think that we're going to see some really big things from him in the very near future.
Gervonta's 29?
Yeah.
Damn.
Yeah, he is.
Damn. You guys are making it worse for me. You got Tim calling Isaac Pitbull Cruz ordinary, and I rated him as the best one. Now he's actually older than I thought. Like you gotta have a better resume than this at 29, dude.
Listen,
if you're a pound for pound guy and like all that, I mean, and we're talking about you might be the number 1 guy in your weight class. I mean, at 29, you gotta have a bigger resume than this, bro.
We're going to keep this list going because we've got about 26 minutes to get these shows done. Make sure you download the app,
Damn, I'm getting old.
become a part of these shows. Tank Davis, Tim Bradley, Tank Davis is your number 2. I think you pretty much explain why.
Yeah, I pretty much went through the list and explained why. I just see what I see, and you see the style matchup. So like, I'm not sitting here looking at resumes. And sometimes resumes you have to take that in consideration, and you could like for instance, like I could take that in consideration with Bubu Andrade and David Benavidez. Like I could take that because think about it. Bubu has fought at 160, 154, and fought once at 168. So like the resume right there, and you seen that, Benavidez has fought his entire career at 168. So we seen what he can do there. You get what I'm saying? So that's when resumes come into it, when you start, looking down and seeing who these guys has fought, seeing how their road has it been tough? Has it been not? But when I look at Gervonta Davis again, man, when you have punching power, you have something special, like you can have boxing ability. And again, my number 1 is, I'm not even gonna say it, but you already know who my number 1 is.
Well, there you go. I knew someone was going to spoil it.
I spoiled it.
Somebody was going to spoil it.
And it's because it's not only his boxing ability, it's his IQ at the end of the day. But again, Tank is my number 2. I told you guys why already. He's my number 2 guy. It's my eye test. And they say, well, what does that mean, Tim? What does that mean? I've been around the sport a very long time. I see what I see. I know what I'm looking at, and I know when I see something that is special. Tank is a special fighter.
Well, you and Chris must have the same prescription, your eye prescription, because Chris, you have Tank as number 2 as well.
Yeah, Tank. Listen, for all the reasons that we were talking about earlier, and again, like I mentioned, his resume in hindsight, man, it's not just who he fought when he fought them, it's what he does to them. He knocks everybody out. Like Jose Pedraza was an undefeated world champion when he fought him. In hindsight, that's a really good win. He knocked him out. Knocked him out, I think, eight rounds. And that was one of his big step-up fights. He had fought literally no one up to that point. His first fight was against Jose Pedraza. I called that fight for the BBC. And, I mean, he stepped up big time in that fight. And he stopped Pedraza, which is not an easy thing to do. So, and in hindsight, this guy is the world champion at 35. He's gone up to 140 now. Pedraza had some good success. So I think that's actually a really good win. You know, the Santa Cruz fight, obviously a smaller guy, but he blasts him out with a highlight reel knockout. So you got to look at the names and also what he's done. If he was just squeaking by these guys, yeah, totally. You could really punch holes in his resume. But you know, he's knocking these guys out. Mario Barrios, you mentioned that one too. He went up to welterweight, fought Keith one-time Thurman, went the distance. Tank knocked him out. Tank stopped him with a body shot. Like that, it's also what you do with these guys. So you got to look a little bit, you know, beyond just, you know, like you said, Champ Floyd. It's like, I don't know about the guy when he's fighting him. But again, I think in hindsight, a lot of what he's done is going to get really, really recognized. And George, what's the name of the show?
Who's the man?
So who kicks whose ass?
Yes,
that's what it's about.
That's it. Yes,
kicking most people's asses except for my number one.
Now, Paulie's got Vasily Lomachenko at number 2. So now one of the first things fans are going to comment on is, what? He's got Lomachenko above Tank Davis? You know, it's already going to start, Paulie. How can that be? So, Paulie, you've got Vasily at number 2.
Well, again, I do look at resumes until a guy looks totally shot, where, you know, some guys get to a point where they start looking totally shot. And then, of course, you start to overcompensate by, you know, looking at other things. But Lomachenko hasn't looked totally shot. Is he the same? No, of course not. But yet, nobody has yet to beat him and dominate him, despite the resume that he's fought. He's fought all kinds of top guys, almost exclusively from his pro debut, which is unheard of. It's probably the only guy in history that has done that, you know. So despite what he's got, about 20 pro fights, they're almost all against world-class opposition, you know. And I do think I'll make a mention what Tim said about he has trouble with athletic guys. He has trouble with athletic lightweights, because athletic lightweights are also using their physicality, because he has no problems with athletes who are his size, like 130, 126 pounds, you know. I think that when it comes to Lomachenko, I think you're going to get to the point now where his age is going to start to have an effect, and guys may start to beat him. I think head-to-head, listen, I mean, Tank may very well beat Lomachenko at this point, head-to-head. But again, I see Lomachenko, who was in a position to marinate his big name and say, you know what, I don't want to fight big names until I get to 10, 15-0. Instead, he was trying to fight them right from the jump. And you got Gervonta Davis, who I don't even know was 29 years old, bro. I'm looking at this guy like he's 26 years old, you know what I mean? Like, and still is like kind of moseying around, looking around. Chris, you mentioned the Pedraza knockout. I was in the fighter meetings with Pedraza. Pedraza at 130 pounds at the end of his tenure at 130 pounds was dead. Was dead coming into the fighting meetings, dead at the weight. You know what I mean? He was just looking for a reason to get out. He just had the IBF title, and he couldn't get out of the 130 pound division. So Tank did him a favor and knocked him out, and he never went back to 130 pounds since. He was already dead in preparation for all those last couple of fights at 130 pounds. You know, so I mean, timing is everything, but still, it's a great win on paper. But when you look between the lines there, you know, that Pedraza win is not as sparkling as it would when you first look at it on paper. Still a good win. And again, it's not a knock on Gervonta Davis, because again, we're talking about the top 3 here. He's still in my top 3. But nonetheless, I look at Lomachenko, who was a guy not only has the resume, sought after the resume, sought after all these big names, tried his best to get these big names, tried his best to constantly test himself against the best. And I think only now, at 35, 36 years old, is he finally slowing down and saying, hey, man, listen, I got to start to choose accordingly, because they're just really just using me like a sponge and just, you know, draining me dry here. You know, they were trying to put him in with Shakur Stevenson now, you know what I mean, coming off the Haney loss, where, again, controversial even that fight, right? I mean, so I mean, he's yet to be dominated despite the resume that he has. He's yet to, and until really somebody starts to show that he's really aging to that point, I really can't hold it against him quite yet, you know? And like I said, it might be around the corner. And again, I say this probably hedging Gervonta to beat him at this point in a head-to-head fight, but that resume and the fact that he sought after it, and the Gervonta's resume, or lack of the resume at this point when he's 29 years old, and the fact that he could seek after it and he doesn't, that kind of, you know, puts me in this position where it's kind of a paradox position where I got to put Lomachenko ahead.
Well, before we get to the number 1, Tim, I need your help with something. Can you
What's up?
Just quickly tell people why they should subscribe to ProBox TV. Tell them why they should download the app.
Listen, y'all already know why y'all should do it. Because y'all see, you get to see faces like this, baby. You know what I'm saying? Champions, world champions, talking boxing, yo. You know what I'm saying? And, you know, so go ahead and download, subscribe. Go ahead and also hit that like button because we need the algorithm. We need it up. You know what I'm saying? And tune in because there's more to come. There is definitely more to come.
There you go. So that's all the reason you need. Now, number one, it was unanimous. You guys all agreed on Shakur Stevenson, who does not have a belt yet. He's fighting for a belt this Thursday against Edwin De Los Santos. So you guys, he's the number one pick. Tim, start with you. Shakur's your number one.
It has everything to do with everything we talked about leading up to this. We talking about discipline. You're talking about a fighter that lives the sport. That's Shakur Stevenson. You're talking about supreme skill. You're talking about technique. You're talking about a guy that has a crazy ring IQ. You know, that spars and trains around the best fighter in the world, Terrence Crawford. I mean, the list goes on. I mean, there's so much to like about Shakur Stevenson. The main thing for me is that what people are going to realize when they see this Dos Santos fight and see Dos Santos, yes, he does have, you know, speed. He does have punching power. He isn't a reactive type of fighter. Like he will go out on his shield. That distance and the way you're going to be able to control distance. If you're not able to land those bombs, if you're not able to place those shots on a moving target, on that target like Shakur Stevenson, how the hell do you think you're going to win the fight? And that's what sets him apart. Those bombs, they got to find a home. And they're not going to be able to find a home against a defensive master like Shakur Stevenson. Okay? Floyd Mayweather showed us the best that how you win fights. Yes, you win fights with offense, but at the same time, you can win championships and many championships with defense, not getting hit. So that's the reason why I have Shakur Stevenson. Although he doesn't have the punching power of a Tank Davis, I have Shakur Stevenson because his defensive prowess goes along with his offensive prowess as well, is the reason why I have him my number one pick. And
how about you?
Everybody.
How about you, Paulie?
Yeah, I think, Tim pretty much said it all. I have Shakur as my number one as well. And again, I'm going to go back to something that I could be criticized about when I said with Gervonta, with the resume at lightweight. Well, I think Shakur is one guy who I make an exception for because he actually, again, is seeking out the tough fights. He's actively seeking out the tough fights, and guys are avoiding him. And this is what I was talking about when it comes to people in the shoes of Gervonta. Because Gervonta has the superstar quality. He has sort of this swagger to him that Shakur, I'm not saying Shakur is corny in any way, but he doesn't have the same kind of swagger. And that also comes with living the life that Shakur does. I mean, Shakur lives in the gym. I mean, yes, he hangs out with hip hoppers too and all that stuff. Listen, we're all affected to a degree by pop culture, right? And Shakur, of course, has that too. But I think nothing is more important to Shakur Stevenson than being the best fighter in the world, pound for pound. I really believe that. When I look at Shakur Stevenson and I see the way he dedicates himself and the way he talks, you can feel it, and the way he fights, that he has actually the ability to get there. I don't think anything is more important to Shakur Stevenson right now than being the number one fighter in the world, pound for pound. Well, I think even the other guys on this list at this point don't have that. I think Lomachenko had that desire at one time. I don't know if Gervonta Davis ever really had that. You know what I mean? Like he's just an ultra talented, powerful fighter who's fun to watch. And like I said, has this swag where he's got this almost side life where, he's obviously living disciplined enough to maintain what he's able to do. But I don't know if his boxing is always his priority once he leaves camp, once he's done with a fight. While Shakur, I think, is just living, breathing it constantly. You know what I mean? And I really think Dos Santos is a really difficult opponent, but there's a special quality to Shakur Stevenson that may make this fight easy. I don't think it'll be easy. I don't see it being easy, but it also wouldn't absolutely shock me if somebody as good as De Los Santos gets dominated by Shakur Stevenson. And that would be a shame because I think De Los Santos would give Gervonta Davis a pretty good fight. You know what I mean? But I think there's an opportunity where Shakur, I could see him run into trouble here. I mean, I kind of expect him to, having some trouble with De Los Santos. But if he ends up getting dominating a guy like De Los Santos, who I look at as very, very dangerous, I also wouldn't be shocked because, damn, this kid is good. This kid is good, and he wants to fight the best constantly, and he's being avoided to that degree.
Absolutely.
And I'm gonna talk about the elephant in the room before the comment section goes absolutely ape shit. There's no Devin Haney on the list for any of us.
Thank you, Chris. I was going to bring that up.
The reason for that
Good
is
reason.
he's not a lightweight. Yes, he's holding some of these titles still. He hasn't been stripped yet. He says he's going to come back down to 135. He's not. Let's be honest. Let's be realistic, guys. Tim, you had mentioned on past shows the amount of muscle mass that he's put on, what he looks at 140. He looks good at 140. He's a big kid and a big guy. He's a big guy, and he's going to be a full 140 pounder. He's going to be a full 47 pounder one day, and not that far down the road. He's still in his growing years, and they're putting in that work, man. You can see it. He's huge. And coming back down to 135 is not happening.
I'll add one thing about Haney before you continue, Chairman. I don't want to cut you off real quick. I also think they're actually smart to kind of do that too. I don't agree with it because I'm a fan of boxing and I want to see the belts to move. But look, we've mentioned the 140-pound who's the man, and we talked about 135-pound who's the man. And Haney's name comes into both conversations because he's doing this. You see, like you got to talk about Haney even when you don't have him on the list at 135 pounds, and you're also going to talk about him at 140 pounds. So it keeps him in multiple conversations, which I guess is smart. I think it's smart.
No, it's a marketing genius. I mean, they keep him relevant. It's very, 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 very smart. But we're talking about who's the man at 135, and I am in agreement with the other two champs over here. Shakur Stevenson is the guy because it's who's the man, who beats everybody else, and Shakur beats everybody. We talked about the vaunted power of Gervonta Davis. We talked about he's got that punch, he's got this, he's got the delivery system, he's got everything. But listen, if you can't hit the guy, you can't beat the guy, and if you can't hit, and nobody can hit Shakur, we haven't seen it. And I think he's that good. He is an absolute master, and not even just defense. He's a master of range. And he's a master of control. He controls the man in front of him. He takes professional killers and turns them into nothing. He makes them whiff at air. His defense, his landed punches against him is abysmally low. No one hits him. And as long as he can keep you from hitting him, he's going to win. And that old saying, like you were saying, Tim, offense wins games, defense wins championships. This kid's going to have a lot of championship belts under his belt because of his great, amazing defense, ring control, and perfection of distance in the ring. The kid he's something special. And listen, he's going to be around for years to come. I believe he is a generational talent, which is why I got him at number 1 in a tough weight class, ahead of guys like Gervonta Davis and Vasily Lomachenko and Murataya and Edwin De Los Santos and Isaac Cruz and all those guys. So, Shakur, you're the man at 135.
There he goes. It's unanimous. You guys all agree. And I'm glad you brought up Devin Haney because, the comments we're going to start. Yes, he still has 3 belts. He's the champion in recess with the WBC, but come Thursday, there'll be a new champion. It's either going to be Shakur Stevenson or it's going to be Edwin De Los Santos. Gentlemen, who's the man at 135? Thank you for the list. Shakur Stevenson is the unanimous choice. Let's see if he picks up a belt on Thursday against Edwin De Los Santos. Make sure you subscribe. Like Tim Bradley said, subscribe, like. Become a part of these shows. Why? Because you see champions talking about boxing every day. ProBox TV is your boxing channel.